So someone on your team is struggling. They're missing deadlines, they seem overwhelmed in meetings, and maybe they're just avoiding some tasks altogether. You want to help, but they don't have a diagnosis. So you think, my hands are tied. They're not, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly why and what to do instead. This is one of the most common misconceptions I hear from managers, that you need to wait for a diagnosis before you can, or even should, offer reasonable adjustments to your team. Today I'm going to walk you through 3 things. First, what the Equality Act actually says about diagnosis, because it's probably not what you think. Second, why so many neurodivergent people don't have a diagnosis and why that's not their fault. And third, the do's and don'ts of helping your neurodivergent staff. So let's get this bit out of the way first, because this is the bit that surprises most managers. Under the Equality Act 2010, a person is considered disabled if they have a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term impact on their day-to-day life. This means it could have a negative impact on their ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. Notice what's missing from that definition: the word diagnosis. It's not in there because there is no legal requirement for it anywhere in the Equality Act. The Equality and Human Rights Commission make this exceptionally clear in their code of practice. I'm going to paraphrase here, but essentially what they're saying is what matters is the effect of the impairment, not the cause or whether it has a medical label. So what does that mean for you as a manager? It means that if someone on your team has characteristics that substantially affect how they can function day to day, whether that's difficulty concentrating, struggling with sensory overload, finding it hard to process verbal information, or numerous things, they very well may be protected under the Equality Act, diagnosis or not. And here's the bit that really catches people off guard. Employers can be held liable if they could have reasonably known that someone had a disability, even if that person never formally disclosed it. The law calls this constructive knowledge. So if you've noticed that someone's struggling but you've done nothing about it because there's no diagnosis on file, that's actually a much riskier position to be in. Let me say that again because it's so important. Waiting for a diagnosis does not protect you. Acting on what you see does. Now that you know that the law doesn't require a diagnosis, let's talk about why so many people don't have one, because this is going to make you a better, more compassionate manager. There are 2 huge barriers, and the first one is access. In England right now, you may be waiting upwards of 12 to 18 months for an ADHD or autism assessment on the NHS. And for autism assessments, many adults are waiting well over 2 years. And in some areas, it's closer to 5. And if someone wants to go private to help speed the process up, they're looking at anywhere between £500 and £2,000. And that's just for the assessment, not for any follow-up support, for example, medication, coaching, therapy, just the assessment. So think about that for a moment. You've got an employee who's genuinely struggling at work right now, and the system's telling them to come back in 2 years. Is it reasonable for you as their manager to also say, come back in 2 years when you've got the paperwork? No, it's not. And without the right support within that time, it's likely that you'll lose them to things like burnout or economic inactivity. The second barrier is more psychological, and not many people talk about this. See, a lot of neurodivergent people, particularly women, people of colour, and anyone else who's been marginalised, have been taught to hide their differences to keep them safe. This means they've spent their entire lives masking. Masking means consciously or unconsciously suppressing parts of yourself to try and fit in, forcing eye contact when it's uncomfortable, scripting conversations in your head beforehand, spending twice as much energy as other people just to appear normal. And when you spent 20 or 30 years doing that, you start to doubt yourself. I hear this all the time. What if I go for an assessment and they say there's nothing wrong with me? Or what if I'm lazy and I've just been making excuses? That fear is so real, and it stops people seeking a diagnosis, which means they stay unsupported at work. So when someone on your team doesn't have a diagnosis, it's rarely that there's nothing going on there. It's usually that the system has failed them or their own self-doubt has. Neither of those things should be a reason for you to withhold the support. If this is giving you a different perspective on how you think about your team, I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe. I make videos like this to help managers support their people better, and having you here helps me reach more of them. So you understand the law now, and you know why some people might not have a diagnosis. Now let's talk about what to actually do. And we're going to start with the biggest single mistake I see managers make. Do not, and I cannot stress this enough, tell someone that you think that they have ADHD, autism, dyslexia, or anything else. I know you think it comes from a good place. You've done some reading, you think you can see the signs, you've watched some videos, maybe even ones like this. You think you're helping, but here's why it actually backfires. Firstly, it's not your role. You're not a clinician, you're not a psychiatrist. Even if you happen to be right, an informal diagnosis from a manager can feel really intrusive. Second, it can massively damage trust. That person may now feel that you've been watching them, analysing them, categorising them, and they may feel really exposed. Especially if they've been masking, which we discussed many people are. That feeling of being found out can be really triggering. And third, it can backfire legally. If you label someone and then treat them differently, you could find yourself going down a path of a discrimination case. So what do you do instead? Well, you focus on the behaviour and what you can see. That's the impact, not the cause. Here's what that might sound like in practice. Instead of, I think you have ADHD, it might be, I've noticed you find it harder to focus in our open plan space. Is there anything that I can change that might help you work more comfortably? Or, I've noticed you seem quite overwhelmed in our team meetings recently. Can we talk about if there's a way I can make those easier for you? Do you see what's happening there? You're not diagnosing anyone, you're not labeling anyone, you're opening a collaborative and curious conversation about the work itself. You're describing something observable. You're genuinely expressing care, and you're putting the ball in their court, giving them the ability to share as much or as little as they want to. See, this is the approach that works, and the beautiful thing is it doesn't need a diagnosis. It doesn't require disclosure. It doesn't even require the word neurodivergent. It just requires you to be a good manager who notices when someone is struggling and asks what would help them. So I want to leave you with something to think about here. I once worked with a manager who told me about someone on their team who was brilliant at their job, really creative thinker, but always late with written reports and visibly stressed in group settings. This had been going on for months. The manager didn't want to say anything because, in their words, I didn't want to make assumptions. But by the time they finally had the conversation, that person was already looking for another job. They'd assumed that the manager didn't care, or worse, that the manager had noticed and decided that they just weren't good enough for them to intervene anyway. One conversation could have changed that. Not, I think you're neurodivergent, just, I notice you're finding this hard, what would help? Because waiting isn't the easy choice. Waiting is a real risk, and sometimes it's the person who needs the support most who's least likely to ask for it. So let's recap. The Equality Act does not require a formal diagnosis. What matters is the effect that somebody's condition has on their daily life, not whether it has a label. And as an employer, you may be expected to act on what you can reasonably see. 2, there are real reasons why people don't have a diagnosis. Long waiting lists, high private costs, years of masking and self-doubt. None of these should be a reason to withhold support. 3, never try and diagnose someone. Instead, focus on what you observe. Lead with curiosity on how you can help the person. Now, I've put together a one-page guide on reasonable adjustments that you can download completely for free, and it covers what the law requires and some examples of practical adjustments you can make today. If this sounds like something that'd be really helpful for you, I've put the link in the description below. And if you found this helpful, please do subscribe. I've got more videos coming on how to have the disclosure conversation, how to run neuro-inclusive meetings, and specific guides for supporting staff with autism, ADHD and dyslexia. For now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.